This is Tommy Spina. You're listening to The Real Truth. Today I'm joined by former U.S. Senator Doug Jones and gubernatorial candidate for the 2026 election coming up. He's running against Tommy Tuberville for governor of Alabama in a rematch, for lack of a better expression. We're going to talk about the recent Supreme Court rulings on Alabama's political maps, what it means for representation and minority voting power, the brewing fight over whether Tuberville even meets the state's residency requirement to be governor, and hard math of getting people registered and out to vote. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Good day, everyone. Welcome to The Real Truth. I'm Tommy Spina, and once again, I have as our guest our gubernatorial candidate for the Democratic Party, Doug Jones, as a guest with us today. Welcome to the show, Doug, one more time.
One more time, and probably not the last time, so thanks for having me again, buddy.
I'm going to stay with you all the way through November, if you'll let me.
I think what's more important is let's stay together once I get inaugurated next year. How's that?
Oh, that's fine too, but one step at a time.
Yeah.
And we are taking steps, but most recently, I think my last interview was with, and we'll touch upon this, was with Judge Clement. And oddly enough, I interviewed him at the same time of day, on the same day, which was Tuesday, about the injunction that was over the redistricting map that the three-judge panel had entered, but the Supreme Court had not yet ruled. And about 4 hours after our interview, the Supreme Court ruled. So that changed things tremendously. So he and I talked about the Purcell principle and deliberate, intentional discrimination and things of that nature leading into that show. And lo and behold, if it didn't come true. So, in plain English, and not to say that Judge Clement didn't give it to me in plain English, we just didn't have the same facts that we have now, and I'm going to get back with him because I know he's not through. He closed the show with, "We just keep fighting." But if you had to just put it in plain English, what the Supreme Court's remap ruling did in Alabama and why it matters to people like me and other people's votes.
Well, essentially, Tom, what the Supreme Court did is essentially say that the Voting Rights Act means nothing anymore. They tried in the Calais decision, which is the Louisiana case, to say, oh, yes, it's still alive. There is still remnants, and you've got to just meet this standard. But our district court, our three-judge panel, which, by the way, to remind folks, was 2 Donald Trump appointees that found that the state of Alabama intentionally discriminated among Black Alabamians and denying their opportunity to have a full representation in the United States Congress. Intentional discrimination. And all of a sudden the Supreme Court says, nah, not really. We just disagree with that. So to hell with you. We're going to go back to a map that we know intentionally does discrimination against these Black folks and Black voters in the Black Belt and down through South Alabama. And they just reinstated these racially gerrymandered districts that the state tried to put in place several years ago that the Supreme Court initially said, no, you can't do it. Now they have said they can't. Essentially, they're saying the Voting Rights Act means nothing. And what that has done in states like Alabama and the old Confederacy, which were the very states that were the reason that the Voting Rights Act was passed to begin with, these states have now rushed to try to change voting patterns to go back to the 60s and deny Black representation. And there has been such an outcry about that. So now, and it's not just outcry in the minority communities in Alabama. This is a fundamental fairness issue that people across this state have said, wait a minute, we're going backwards. Are you kidding me? We've come so far in Alabama. We've done some things. We've outlived our past, and now you want us to go back, Governor Ivey? You want us to go back, Alabama legislature? And that's exactly what's happened. We have rejoined the old Confederacy. So now voters in the 2nd Congressional District are going to get some interesting choices. And I think Shamari Figures is going to galvanize voters down there. And even though that district was designed to make sure he does not go back to Congress, I think they got another thing coming. And I think people across that district, across the state, are energized, and they're going to say, no, we're not going back. We're not going to do those kind of things. And in simple language, we've got to get out and vote to make sure that our legislature, our next governor, our state offices understand that this is a state for everybody, not just a select few who might have won some gerrymandered elections in the past.
You know, there was a line in the Calais decision that it was one sentence. This does not affect Alabama, or does not affect the Milligan case, which was Alabama.
Right. That's correct.
And then they did exactly what they did that you just described.
It was unbelievable. I mean, look,
how do they rationalize that? Has somebody challenged them on that?
They don't, Tom. There is no rationalization for it. A principle means nothing anymore. A precedent means nothing anymore. This Supreme Court, at least a majority of this Supreme Court, particularly when it comes to voting rights and other rights of minorities and women, precedent and principles mean nothing. This is an outcome-driven court. They decide what they want the result to be, then figure out a way to get there. That's exactly what has happened with this court. This court has lost its objectivity completely. You may as well slap partisan labels on everyone. Hell, we may as well elect them according to partisan labels, because that's exactly what this majority is doing time and time again. And we saw it, and the final blow, in my view, I have done everything I could to give the Supreme Court the benefit of some doubt, except for a couple of them. A couple of them don't deserve any benefit of the doubt. But as an institution, the majority of the court, I've kind of given some leeway, because, we're lawyers. We want to believe in a Supreme Court that follows their own precedent and follows their own principles. And what this court did was to overrule their principles and overrule the precedent that this very same court just did 3 years ago.
Right.
And so that is purely outcome driven. And it's a shame. It's going to take a long time, I think, for this court to overcome and to gain back the trust of the American people.
It goes back to where I started this gig with the rule of law. It doesn't exist anymore at the Supreme Court level, at least. I still believe in our district court judges. And I think the 3-judge panel supports what I just said.
That's correct. Look, I want to make sure folks understand that across this country, now we've always had some judges on both sides of the political aisle who tended to, on any number of cases, be a little bit outcome driven. But what we're seeing now is primarily with the Supreme Court, some courts of appeal. But I think by and large, the district judges, courts of appeal, they try to get it right. They try to follow the law. They follow the facts. They apply the law to those facts. And the outcome is what it is. Now, we can have disagreements about that and weird things. It's why we have 9 members on the Supreme Court, because people can disagree. But this has gone beyond that. This has become so partisan that it's patently obvious what's going on with them. And that's not what we're seeing with district courts and other courts around this country.
Well, obviously in Alabama, the Black Belt, which people don't understand, that really refers to the dirt under the ground that is that color, and not necessarily the majority of individuals that the color of their skin that live in that area. In addition to the Black Belt, Birmingham and Mobile and other rural counties are the most affected, I suppose, by this map. How is that changing where you focus your campaign?
Well, I don't know if it's really changing too much because except for this. One of the areas that we have tried to break into, so to speak, to get more traction has been down in the Wiregrass area, which is there's a lot of farming, there's a lot of rural areas down there. It's traditionally in the last 20 years been very conservative. We've tried a lot of different ways to get to messages and to work down there, and we've done some really good things down there. I had a really good fundraiser down in Dothan just about a month ago. But this is going to re-energize a lot of people down there because that's the area that is primarily going to be affected by this ruling. That whole second district now is that Wiregrass area in southeast Alabama. And
Barber County, Houston County.
Barber, Houston, those areas. And so you've got in across all the way over to like a few counties over across the Florida Panhandle line, and so I think with now you're going to have Shamari Figures, who's the incumbent for the second district. This is going to be new areas for him. He's going to be out there a lot more. He's going to be seen, and quite frankly, I expect there to be a lot more emphasis on this particular district from national funding, national interests that are going to come in to protect Shamari Figures. So we will probably spend more time, more resources in that area. And I say it's a combination of not just Doug Jones, but you've got a number of folks like Phil Linsler and Jeff McLaughlin and Wayne Rogers and others that are running that I think now this presents some really unique opportunities in that area that we haven't had before. Or that we've had some, but they've not been as great as they are now. Let me put it that way.
Well, obviously, the effect of what the Supreme Court did was to dilute minority voting power. How do you talk about that here at home so that it motivates turnout? Because to me, turnout is the key. Without
it is.
You don't want it to sound like partisan noise. I mean, it's really about getting out there and voting.
Yeah, and it's about fundamental fairness. I mean, and you don't just put this at the foot of the Supreme Court. You put this at the foot of the governor. I would have never called, as governor of the state of Alabama, I would have never called a special session that was specifically designed to dilute the voting power of any block of Alabama citizens. It doesn't matter who it is. I would have never spent $400,000 of taxpayer money and gotten the legislature to ram through something that I knew was going to potentially dilute the voting power of any citizens in this state. And that's exactly what happened. So this all comes back to our government, not just the Supreme Court. We didn't have to do this. In fact, Tom, we talk about rejoining the old Confederacy. South Carolina refused to do it. Their governor called a special session, and the legislature said, you know what, we're not going to do that right now. We're going to let this go forward as is. We'll consider it down the road. So we didn't have to do this. And I think that is something that all people need to take stock of, because it's number one, it was their money. Number two, if it can happen there, it can happen just about anywhere on the drop of a dime. And so I think that one of the things that folks need to be looking at in terms of motivating to get folks out to vote is how are people being good stewards of the money, number one. And number two is how are we being viewed when we try to make sure that folks are not being properly represented. And I think that alone is going to motivate a lot of people, not just the minority community, because the thing that people need to always remember here is that this is about fairness. This is about a population that is ostensibly, and I use that word deliberately, ostensibly, the folks in Montgomery are trying to say that they don't want you to have any power. So here's the thing that we're trying to make sure people understand. Gerrymandering, particularly racial and political gerrymandering, is one of the worst things that this country has ever done for the political discourse in this country. When you gerrymander so much the way Alabama has and the way so many other states have, you don't have those political dialogues. You don't have the give and take. You don't have anything but a small number of people in a particular district who are usually the extremes on both parties that are controlling the nominee. And that is not good for democracy. That's number one. So the second thing is that people need to know that when you do this, you're using old data. I mean, they're gerrymandering what they think is going to be a safe conservative Republican district, okay, because that's what they think all of Alabama is, which it's not. That's pretty clear that it's not. But they're trying to use old census data, old voting patterns to basically say, you know what, we're just going to take your dang votes for granted. We're going to assume that you are going to vote the exact same way, that you're not going to care about the issues, that you're not going to look at the candidates. We're just going to assume you're going to vote the exact same way. So we're going to take that for granted and just gerrymander this way. Well, our view of this coming election is that it's time to flip the script. We need to develop new data. We need to show folks that you should not take votes for granted, that that folks in Alabama are going to care about the issues. They're going to care about their candidates, and they're going to start looking beyond just the political party or a political tribe and vote their conscience and vote what's best for them and their families. And that's where the fallacy of all this gerrymandering lies. I think you're going to see that what started this all in Texas, those 5 districts, I'm not so dang sure that they're going to flip Republican these days, because they've taken the Hispanic vote for granted based only on what happened last election. I think that that's going to change. And I think the people of Alabama are also going to show this legislature, we're tired of you taking our votes for granted.
Well, I recognize that the remap fight has to be, at least, I don't want to call it a central theme of your campaign, but it is a backdrop. But there are still the issues that we discussed the last time we spoke about affordability, right, Medicaid expansion, and the lottery, for example. Would that be a fair statement?
There's no question. And that's what the Republican legislature is taking for granted right now. They are believing that if we can gerrymander around this, that we can just snooker folks enough that they're not going to listen to people. They're going to vote the same way. But I'm telling you, people out there, and I think the numbers that you and I talked about in the primary this last go round on May the 19th, bear that out. People are listening and paying attention to the issues now, and who is talking about those things that mean the most to them and their families. And that's not what this legislature, not what this party that's been in control of Alabama since 2010, that's not what they want to hear, because they ain't talking about it. They're trying to talk about, they want to make sure that we're protecting the borders. Well, okay, I'll protect the border. Are you telling me you want to close the border between Alabama and Florida or Georgia or Tennessee or Mississippi? I don't think so.
There is no border.
We're going to be talking about the issues that actually matter to the people in the state.
Since you brought that up, to segue into my next subject, there is no border between Alabama and Florida. As a consequence, you can run for governor of Alabama no matter if you live in Alabama or Florida. So with that being said, I know you do not have one sentence, but what's the core difference between you and Tommy Tuberville when it comes to democracy and representation in Alabama? I don't think that can be answered in one sentence.
No, I don't think it can. But I mean, at the very heart of it is, Tom, and you know me, I'm an Alabama guy through and through. I've lived here all my life. Tuberville, and I have nothing against folks that move here and live here and work here and make a living here and do things and stay here for a long time. If they want to run for public office, that's great. But don't just come in here and swagger around and pretend that you live here when you live on a beach down in Florida. We see that happening, by the way, all over America with the Republican Party. You look out in Iowa, Rob Sands running against a guy who's really doing the same thing in Iowa. They just kind of swoop people in because that have some money and some name recognition, and that's what they think. That's what Tuberville. I mean, look, the Republican Party is going to determine in the first instance whether or not he is eligible. They've already decided at one point that they just weren't going to hear it, but then all of a sudden there was a ruckus kicked up. Now they say they're going to hear it, but the question is whether or not they're really going to examine it or whether they're just going to rubber stamp some things. And that is his eligibility, whether he's actually been a resident of Alabama for 7 years, as opposed to just having a house and be here on occasions. Just like I said, I think that Tuberville uses Alabama like a rest stop on the way to the beach. Mm-hmm. But we'll see how that happens. But regardless,
I call it Bates' House of Turkey.
Exactly. It's an issue I think people have to consider. How much time has he really spent here? So even as a U.S. Senator, just swooping in to give a speech to the Chamber of Commerce doesn't mean you're Alabama and you're paying attention to Alabama. That's what I've been doing, even since I left the Senate. Living here and traveling here and around the state, talking to various groups. I know this state, so it's going to be a big issue. We'll see what happens to him in the Republican Party and in a lawsuit if something gets filed. I don't know if it will or not.
Well, I wanted you to put your prosecutor hat on. So this question of residency, if you were called upon to point out the evidence that supports his lack of residency from public records or time spent out of state or property in tax filings, whatever there is, what evidence would you go to, or what evidence are you aware of that exists that supports, other than what we have read, and I understand the tax returns are released, but it was like reading people don't know what a 302 is, but right. That's what the FBI produces when they interview a witness and make a report, and they do what's called redact, what they don't want you to see. And sometimes you get a piece of paper that is nothing but black, where everything has been redacted. So with that being said, are you aware of specific evidence beyond that which has been reported that would support your case if you were prosecuting this case?
Look, I don't think I need any evidence beyond that which is reported. I mean, these tax returns that you're talking about, it was kind of crazy because they redacted them, but then if you read the reports, his lawyers left a barcode that any AI program can read. That gives you pretty much the information, except for one important thing. The important thing that's not given is when that return was filed, because the returns don't make a little bit of sense. For instance, the 2018 return says that he filed a return in Alabama in 2017, but the return in 2018 also says he didn't move to Alabama until August of 2018. So there's that one inconsistency. Then there's the inconsistency with an answer that they gave that's also a public record, that if he moved to Alabama in August of 2018, why did he and his wife vote in Florida in 2018? Now that doesn't compute. You either committed voter fraud or you're not telling the truth on that tax return one way or another if that tax return was filed appropriately. Those are just some things. But the travel records in the Senate had him going back and forth, not to Auburn, but to Florida when he first got into the Senate for a couple of years. Then his PAC started paying for that when they realized that the Senate wouldn't pay for them to go down there all the time. You've got other records. The homestead was filed in his son's name, not his name or his wife's name. He didn't get on that deed till a couple of years ago. There is a mountain of evidence that would indicate that he is a resident of Florida. But again, that's not for me to determine. We're going to be bringing it out if he remains to be the nominee. But in the first instance, we'll see what the Republicans do. If they just sweep it under the carpet and rubber stamp what they want to do, then we'll see if somebody actually files something in court. But regardless, I think it's an issue. If he remains on the ballot, I think not just his residency, but the amount of time he spends in Alabama and getting to know the people of this state, that is going to be a huge issue. Because the things he has done as a United States Senator would not indicate that he's cared one dang thing about the people of this state.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. What you're asking voters, I think, to see residency as is more than just being a legal disqualifier, but a character question about how rooted he is in the state of Alabama.
100%. 100%. You cannot just blow in and blow out of here and think that you can lead as the governor of this state. It makes you wonder if there's some ulterior motive that he has about why he wants to be governor. And does he think he can make more money as governor than he has made as U.S. Senator? Because he's made a lot as United States Senator with information that he's gained on the Agriculture Committee. He's made, if you just look at the ethics forums. So is there something else why you would want to be the governor of Alabama? Because he's dang sure not putting forth any programs or talking about the issues that are going to help people at their kitchen tables decide how their family's going to eat the next day, or where they're going to buy, how they can buy gas and travel and do the things necessary for a family to survive.
The last time we spoke was shortly after the primary, and we did a little bit of an analysis. Of course, you probably have much more information now because we spoke almost the following day, I think. But looking at the numbers at this point in time, how many additional or activated voters do you believe you need, and in which counties, to have a real shot at winning this race?
Well, it's a hard thing to answer the way you ask the question. What we're looking at is a re-energized voting base that we know has been out there. I mean, we go back and everybody points to me losing to Tuberville in 2020, which I did, but I got 920,000 votes, Tom. 920,000. That's a lot of votes. More than any Democrats got, enough to win.
Well, that's a third. That's a third of our population, isn't it?
Well, that's about right. It's a third. It's at least about a third of, or 25% or so of the eligible voters. But we know from history that we're not going to have the turnout like we have in presidential years. And so if we can get those folks motivated to turn out again for me and for this ticket, then we are not just ahead of the game, we've won the game. And I think what we saw this time in the primary is that there is that motivation. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples that we saw that with some numbers that we didn't have the last time we talked. Let's just look at the surrounding counties, two surrounding counties from Jefferson County. Shelby County saw an increase of Democratic ballots of 262%.
Wow.
Okay, from 2022. while the Republicans were down 27%.
So that's a 300% swing.
That's right. Same thing in St. Clair County. They saw a 246 increase in the Democratic ballots, 24% decrease in Republicans. Now, these are not always the most votes in these counties, but what we're seeing is statewide similar numbers. And so if those continue to translate and you work these through, you can see not only a path to winning, you see that the odds tilt in our favor. And that's what I think is so exciting about this race.
I think closing this conversation, I would like to know, practically speaking, what your campaign is doing to help people actually cast a ballot under Alabama's rules. Are y'all doing registration drives, identification help, absentee support, rides to the polls?
Well,
how can listeners of this program plug into that effort if they're, because I have people calling me all the time that want to do something for you, with you, to help you?
Well, first of all, as soon as we do have a couple of runoffs coming up on
19th.
The 19th. No, the 16th, June the 16th, this coming Tuesday. All right, is when the runoffs will be. And there's not too many, but there's a runoff for the U.S. Senate. There's a runoff up
AG's
in the
office.
District. Yeah.
AG's office has one.
Yeah, those are Republican votes. But you can plug into DougJones.com, and we will try to get folks plugged in, because we're going to be doing a lot of those things. We're working with a lot of different folks. Registration is going to be important, mainly for younger voters, because what we're really trying to do is target those voters that we know have voted in the past, but maybe don't vote very frequently, to try to get them back out to vote. So we're going to be doing a lot of calling. We're going to be doing some door knocking. We're going to be doing those kind of things to go directly to people. We're going to be out there everywhere. We've got a coordinated campaign with other candidates that we're going to be trying to get out there and meet people. We're going to be doing more events. You know, as now that we're gearing into the summer, the primary behind us, getting into the summer and toward the fall, we'll be doing more events, more town halls, in which we want to invite people that are not just Democrats. We want to invite communities. We want to have dialogues with people to talk about the issues, because one of the things, even if somebody doesn't end up, if they come and end up not voting for me, the odds are that we've learned something in the discussions that we're having that will help make me a better candidate, but more importantly, help make me a better governor if I can get elected. And those are the kind of things we're going to be doing all summer. Just watch for us. We've got all manner of things that we're going to be doing, and don't rule out some of the other candidates like Phil Ensler and Ron Sparks and Wayne Rogers and Violet Edwards and Roz Houston, and Jeff McLaughlin. Everybody's going to be out there doing some things, talking to people and having those kind of dialogues.
If there's one thing about this conversation we've had, and I think I may say so myself, our past two conversations have been very stimulating for me intellectually, and I hope so for you. And I most importantly hope so for those that are listening. If there's one thing you hope an undecided Alabama voter takes away from this conversation today about maps and residencies and turnout, what is it?
I think it's the same thing from all of our conversations, Tom, and that is that we care about what people think. We care about the issues that Alabamians are facing, and that we just want folks to give us a chance. Take a look at everything we're saying and doing. You're not going to agree with everything, but I want folks to take away to say that from every conversation, you know what? This guy cares about Alabama. He cares about me. I might not agree with him on everything, but when somebody cares about you, you are more than halfway home to making sure they get the vote, and importantly, being a good public servant. That's what I want folks to take away.
And would that be the question you would want people to ask you? if they had an opportunity to ask you a question, what would that question be?
It would probably, well, that would depend, because there are so many folks that in Alabama that are facing different issues. Our farmers are facing one thing with higher diesel prices, with the loss of markets. You know, I'm going to tell you something, guys. To speaking of farmers, we got cattle farmers out there who are scared to death right now because the herds are already down. And if you look and see what's starting to happen with, and I know this is going to be weird, but it's called a screw worm. We may lose a lot of beef in the next year, and beef prices are going to go through the roof. I would want farmers to ask me about what we can do to help them survive, because bankruptcies are continuing. Folks that don't have health care, I want them to ask me, what are you going to do to get me decent health care that I can afford? There's not, I think, a single question. Tom, I think it depends on circumstances of folks, and that's why we're getting out as much as we are to as many people as we are, so that we can hear from folks from all walks of life. It's not that we are trying to be the be all to end all for everybody, but we learn from some folks and we see. But I just want folks to say the one question is, are you going to think about me when you become governor? And the answer to that question will always be yes.
And that is the real truth. Doug, God bless you. Thank you for being with me. I'll be back in touch. You know I will.
I hope so.
Let's see how things unfold in the next few weeks or months. Get yourself some rest when you can. I know those are few and far between, but thanks for your time today.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Anytime.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me today on The Real Truth. My name is Tommy Spina. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I hope you will follow or subscribe to my podcast and listen in to the next episode. If you found it valuable, please take a moment to rate it and review it. It helps us to reach more listeners that care about the issues that matter. Share it with a friend. Stay engaged, and remember, the truth matters. I'll see you next time.